One signature turned my dream of homeownership into a financial nightmare. Did I really just unleash a community of outraged homeowners, ready to take down the smooth-talking loan shark who deceived me? As the sun crept higher, spilling bright light into my living room and illuminating the very essence of my questionable decisions, I squinted at that infernal contract. My heart raced with disbelief, pounding like a heavy bass line at an especially raucous party. Adjustable rate mortgage, I muttered, the phrase rolling out of my mouth like a stale piece of gum stuck on the bottom of a high-heeled shoe. How had I stood there, starry-eyed, listening to Vincent Crowe, Greene Moneybags himself, selling me a dream so perfectly polished it could have been on the cover of a brochure meant for blissfully ignorant first-time homeowners? I'd imagined my daughter laughing in a bright yard, baking cookies in an actual kitchen instead of a microwave. I never envisioned being a hostage to a landmine of financial disaster. Sparkling stars were dimming fast, and I was perilously close to stepping on the shiny but treacherous contracts littering my dreamscape. Nina's voice shot through my troubled thoughts like a supernova, her skepticism cracking open the blissful bubble I'd unwittingly floated into. "Didn't you read the fine print, Jordan?" she asked, eyebrow arched like she was judging my very existence, her denim jacket style juxtaposed to my restrained blazer. "Do you even know what an adjustable rate mortgage means?" With the kind of dramatic flair I would later attribute to her role in my impending financial horror story, she began uncovering layers of jargon I had unwittingly agreed to. Each term seemed more sinister than the last. Interest rates that could spiral into the atmosphere, monthly payments lurking like hidden beasts, and those downright vile hidden fees that were about as welcome as a skunk at a garden party. How had it come to this? I thought I was a savvy woman with a degree in marketing. I could pitch a product, like a pro. But here I sat, mousetrap bait for that suave loan officer, who wore charm like some potent deodorant that made me forget to read the terrifying clauses hiding beneath his golden aura. My mind raced back to the moment when Vincent had flashed his toothy grin, whispering sweet nothings about home appreciation and financial freedom. All the while, he artfully distracted me with tales of sky-high property values that made my head spin faster than the dials on a roulette wheel. Was I really that naive? It felt like I had signed away my future under the influence of some bizarre spell. And then came the inevitable call, my first monthly mortgage payment that had arrived faster than a hangry mob, as if propelled by an unseen demon. Staring at that astronomical figure, I could hardly breathe. My dreams of stability cracked right before me, each dollar inflating with the feverish gusto of a balloon on helium. I should have known better. I should have recognized Vincent's voice for what it was, Pied Piper poetry, leading me straight into bankruptcy oblivion. "Can we ever go back?" I whispered as I stared into Nina's eyes, which glimmered with disbelief. Or was it pity? Her analytical brain shifted into overdrive as she pieced together a plan. "Oh, honey, we will not go down without a fight," she announced, tossing her hair back, her denim-clad arms gesturing wildly as though they were infusing magic into the air. She began preparing spreadsheets, charts, and visual aids that would make any financial analyst's heart sing. But there was something so cathartic about diving into this chaotic mess with her. I was ready, armed with my fury and her fierce determination. What Vincent had failed to factor into his slick sales pitch was my friend's relentless spirit and her pursuit of justice. There was a certain glee in envisioning how this grand debacle would undo itself, all thanks to the crosshairs of karma narrowing in on Mr. Crowe. Before long, our crusade against Vincent transformed into a whirlwind of social media campaigns, angry tweets, and a heartwarming sense of community as neighbors and other victims of his predatory charm banded together to expose him. Who knew that my innocent quest for a slice of the American dream would become a full-blown exposé of deception? My once cozy living room became a headquarters for strategy meetings, where we strategized ways to unmask Vincent and draw attention to those hidden clauses that thrived in the dimly lit corners of banking offices, the real estate world's version of cockroaches. Each gathering amplified our outrage, and with each shared story, the fire of indignation grew hotter, igniting a community determined to fight back. I laughed at the thought of how we had gone from sheepish borrowers to roaring lions, hunting down those who preyed upon our dreams with shiny niceties. So there I was, a total shenanigan, ready to confront this venomous charm dealer armed with knowledge and support. I could almost envision Vincent recoiling from our wrath, his slick demeanor melting away as fast as ice in July. The thrill of potential success bubbled inside me like a freshly carbonated soda. and I couldn't help but revel in the delicious anticipation of calling out Greene Moneybags where it mattered most, right behind the mahogany desk he used to shuffle paper with flair. The world might be crudely fashioned around money and mortgages, but I was done being a passive participant in my own story. I could taste the sweet nectar of justice on my tongue, and oh, how glorious it was. How the tables would turn on the loan officer who'd hijacked my dreams with his glossy promises of stability. Would he squirm like the overcooked pasta that he was, wriggling in the boiling water of his own greed? Only time would tell. The sun sank low on the horizon, casting shadows that danced across my newly acquired living room, turning mundane boxes into ominous shapes that threatened to swallow us whole. Just 1 month ago, I envisioned in this very space Marie Kondo-approved organization and family game nights, but now it was a chaotic battlefield of cardboard, stress, and the bitter aftertaste of outrage. Replaying Vincent Crowe's voice in my mind sent shivers down my spine. His insidious promises, each syllable like a note in a symphony of deception, rang over and over, drowning out any joy I had tried to muster on this moving day. Adjustable rate mortgage, I spat out, each word tasting rancid, and I could feel my blood pressure rising like a hot air balloon, tethered to the earth only by the regret weighing on my shoulders. As I shoved another box into a corner, the tactics of that boisterous loan shark began to fuel a fiercer fire inside me, murmuring sweetly, "This isn't over." By the time Nina burst through my cluttered front door wielding a laptop like a shield, I knew the floodgates of fury were wide open. "All right, my friend," she exclaimed, as if we were soldiers preparing for war against the most diabolical villain imaginable. On her screen flickered numbers and charts, words dancing across the digital space like anarchic sprites, and suddenly it felt like we were at a world-renowned cooking show, and the pièce de résistance was, "Revenge is best served cold. Let's break down Vincent's charming facade and expose every hidden clause." As she spoke, an electric thrill surged through me. There was something irresistibly delicious about peeling away the gloss on Vincent's golden deception, revealing the tarnished truth hiding beneath. Who knew a laptop full of spreadsheets could feel so empowering? This was a twist in the plot I had never anticipated, fighting back armed with facts and a relentless determination. The real turning point hit me harder than a bad infomercial at midnight. Nina's plan wasn't just about gathering data. It equipped us with the tools for a monstrous social media campaign, which with every tweet and post became a nuclear reaction. "Look, Jordan, if we can just get 100 people sharing their stories," Nina said, her eyes wild with enthusiasm, "maybe we turn this thing into an avalanche." Each share fueled the momentum like rocket fuel on our freshly crafted crusade. The movement blossomed into a small army of betrayed homeowners, each of us packing memories of Vincent's sugar-coated sales pitches with a punch of vinegar. Empowered by our collective frustration, we crafted an entire narrative, unmasking him as the true villain he was. One evening, an unsuspecting neighbor joined the fray, unveiling her own financial nightmare courtesy of our handsome predator, and I felt like we were spinning the threads of our own vengeance. Who knew that sharing stories, the real stories, filled with the ethos of our shared struggles, could pack such a punch? One morning, armed with our formidable new platform and a headline that would make a tabloid journalist weep with envy, we released a campaign that would make even the most seasoned marketing guru proud. "Dismantle the Crow," we boldly proclaimed in all caps, our outrage echoing across the virtual landscape like a clarion call from justice. Every retweet felt like a mini festival. Every like was our battle cry. Gathering support from far beyond our neighborhood, turns out there were a multitude of unsuspecting first-time buyers led down Vincent's sinister path. As our followers multiplied, each repost and comment served to remind me that the American dream might have been fragile in this context, but our fight for it was solid and unwavering. Wasn't it ironic that this whole ordeal, from naive optimism to pure outrage, had united us? Our community thrived on this tempestuous journey together, each story more horrifying than the last, knitting a tapestry of righteous fury that stretched wider than I ever thought possible. Then came the day of reckoning. We had set our sights on turning our campaign into an in-person showdown. It felt intoxicating to envision Vincent sitting across a conference table, his slicked back hair holding back more than just arrogance. It concealed a genuine fear that we might just take him down. "Oh, the irony," I snickered to Nina as we prepared our materials, drowning in spreadsheets and testimonies that would lay his financial treachery bare. "This shows that karma isn't just a mean girl in high school. It's a relentless force, and it's about to turn on him. The anticipation wrapped around me like a well-fitted jacket, hugging my frustration and invigorating my drive. The prospect of confronting the very man who had so carelessly tossed my dreams into chaos felt like tasting victory, even before stepping foot into that meeting. As we stormed the office, I nearly giddy with trepidation and anticipation. I could almost hear the theme song for our crusade blaring in my head, a ballad of betrayal and justice converging right here in the lining of Vincent's mogul's skirted realm. Nina and I stood poised for battle, outrage echoing in the corridor like the thunderous applause of an impending crowd. There he was, Vincent, the loan shark in his natural habitat, all slick confidence and practiced nonchalance, unaware of the storm brewing just outside. My hands clenched into fists of determination as I caught his eye and felt our fates collide like a dramatic plot twist in a space opera. Would the karmic scales balance today, as I prepared to confront the man who had turned my dream home into a financial nightmare? The showdown was undoubtedly upon us. This was only the beginning of a reckoning that would definitely leave an unforgettable mark. The tension in the room was palpable, as Nina and I squared our shoulders, stepping into the lair of our financial demon, with the kind of fervor reserved for superheroes facing their most sinister arch-nemeses. There he sat, Vincent Crowe, ensconced in an oversized leather chair that might as well have been a throne, surveying his dominion like a lion reclining on the savannah. The sheer hubris radiating from him was a pathetic sight. A man not just draped in his badly tailored suit, but also wrapped up in a delusion that he was untouchable. My stomach churned as I remembered the stories of families like mine who had experienced the consequences of his malevolent charm. He flashed a toothy grin that made me envision a crocodile with a newfound sense of glee. "Well, if it isn't my favorite home-buying duo," he exclaimed with exaggerated enthusiasm that dripped insincerity. "How can I help you today?" The audacity! It was like being offered a slice of cake by the very baker who had poisoned it. How dare he feign ignorance? Nina, ever the warrior in our quest for justice, unleashed the first armament, a meticulously fashioned icebreaker that was equal parts humor and edge, cutting through his even aura. "We're not here for your infamous tea and crumpets, Vincent," she quipped, her tone dripping with sarcasm. "We're here because you seem to have confused selling mortgages with peddling snake oil." The brilliance of her words hung in the air like a fresh fart, and for a split second, I swore I saw Vincent's eyebrows arch in a delightful cocktail of confusion and horror. I could hardly suppress my own smirk, ranking right up there with the guffaws of a raucous audience, witnessing a spectacular roast. Fueled by the rising tides of camaraderie and our shared sense of purpose, my heart thundered, ready to rip him a new one with every arsenal Nina had loaded into her laptop. With a sharp click of the keyboard, spanning numbers and bold accusations exploded onto the screen like fireworks on the 4th of July. "Here's the breakdown," Nina declared, her finger poised like a conductor's baton. "In just 6 short months, your darling adjustable rate mortgages have turned into adjustable nightmares. For us. You promised stability, yet here we are, caught in a whirlwind of fluctuating payments that have sucked our financial lifeblood right out of us." With every statistic she presented, Vincent's forced grin faded gradually, replaced by a twisted grimace that danced between disbelief and irritation. "Come now, ladies. Adjustables have their benefits if you truly invest wisely," he blustered, swatting our accusations aside like an annoying fly. I couldn't restrain my incredulity, practically sputtering in outrage. "Invest wisely? You mean when you lulled us into a false sense of security with promises of low rates, only to be crushed under the weight of your greed? We weren't investing. We were ambushed." And just when I thought his arrogance couldn't escalate any further, Vincent leaned in, fingers steepled in what I can only refer to as the slick shark lurking pose, as he decided to get personal. "You know, Jordan, sometimes you have to make decisions that feel uncomfortable to achieve greatness," he said, a disingenuous gleam sparking in his eye. "I'm sure you want the best for your daughter." My mouth hung open as if he'd just revealed the hidden code to a dark sorcery. How dare he employ the maternal card like it was a trumping ace in a never-ending game of poker? It was a blatant attempt at emotional manipulation met with a righteous fire roaring inside me. "How dare you, Vincent? You don't know the first thing about what's good for my child." Before he could hiss a retort, I pushed forward. "You talk about greatness through pain, yet you're sitting here profiting off our suffering, rooted in predatory lies." A rush of adrenaline surged through me as I staged my own personal coup against his slimy tactics. Lo and behold, I barely recognized the fierceness in my voice. It was like channeling goddesses of vengeance from the realms of justice. We are not here to simply spill our grievances and flutter our eyelashes at your malignant charm. No, today is about aligning the stars for accountability, I announced, reclaiming every ounce of dignity that had waned under his predatory glances. The indignation from our army of homeowners fueled me, igniting a firestorm of pent-up heartache, and anger coalesced into a resolve so strong, I could practically hear it crackle. You think you can just peddle your financial poison and disappear into the darkness? I continued. It's time to shine a light on your deceit, Vincent. You are not just a loan officer, you're a villain in this tale, one we plan to expose. Then suddenly, like ambient darkness shifting under bright neon lights, I saw the gears inside Vincent's polished machinations begin to grind to a halt. He swayed, seated crookedly, an expression of undeniable panic clouding those twinkling baby blue eyes. In that moment, my heart fluttered dangerously close to the realm of victorious glee. This was the very moment I had anticipated, a tectonic shift that sent shockwaves through his granite walls of confidence. Please, quote the fine print, you cannot hold me liable. Clients sign everything willingly, he sputtered, words pouring forth in a desperate spray of defensive theatrics. But we had no interest in his rehearsed lines. We were armed with our stories, and that hopeless floundering of his was a dance left to the unfortunate ones who could not admit their wrongdoings. Oh, how sweet this turn of fate was, to watch the predator squirm before the fierce, united front of his once oblivious prey. As the reality of our power consolidated like a beautifully crafted storm on the horizon, Nina flashed me a smirk that could illuminate the darkest soul. With our collective courage swelling, I knew we wouldn't retreat a step backward now. It was time to take the steps necessary for justice, real, gritty justice. The battle had transformed into a revolution, the stakes had risen, and we had barely begun to scratch the surface. Are you ready for the dawn of a new era, Vincent? Your corporate empire built on deception isn't as clean-cut as you thought. We hold the power to change this entire narrative, one story at a time, starting with you. Nina's voice rang out, the battle hymn to our victorious march against this charlatan transgressor. Today, it felt as though the clouds could no longer hide behind shadows. We were finally on the attack. Would our uprising topple Vincent Crowe off his proverbial pedestal? Only time would tell, as I leaned into the whirlwind of scorn and triumph, waiting to be unleashed. As I gazed at Vincent, his earlier insouciance now replaced by a slight sheen of perspiration, my heart raced like a freight train careening towards its destination of justice. The scene felt like a moment out of a superhero movie. Only instead of capes and tights, we were armed with hard facts and the unshakable will of a community that was tired of being taken for a ride on the financial roller coaster of despair. Nina's unwavering resolve alongside me felt transformative. With every ounce of fearlessness, I leaned forward, ready to dismantle this man's narrative, strip away his facade of charm, and unveil the predator hiding beneath the veneer of a peddler of dreams. You think those signed papers absolve you? Let's try a little honesty for a change, Vincent. Let's talk unwitting victims, misleading promises, and the avalanche of consequences your investing wisdom has unleashed on families like mine. The chamber hung heavy as my words reverberated off the walls, dancing among the half-hearted decorations meant to cultivate a sense of corporate welcome, now serving only to remind us of the treachery lurking inside. Nina sat poised, an impenetrable fortress of knowledge and justice, her fingers dancing across the keyboard as she pulled up testimonials from other victims. A community hidden in the shadows, now stepping into the glaring light of accountability. Do you recognize this name, Vincent? She asked coolly, her eyes narrowing as a collective gasp filled the room from the faint echoes of other borrowers over the speaker. The Johnsons? They lost everything because of your brilliant advice. All because you sold them a pit of unending payments dressed up as paradise? Vincent's steely composure faltered, the facade of the charismatic loan officer cracking under the glimmering pressure of truth. He shifted uneasily as the horror of shared experiences started mounting, like a snowball rolling downhill, gaining size and horror with every recount of misplaced trust. These are outlier cases, he huffed in his best attempt at retaining authority, but his flustered defenses were no match for the roiling determination to expose him. Outliers? No, Vincent, you're the common denominator, the one consistent thread binding all our stories together. It's your greed that makes the threads of others unravel, and you can patently deny it all you want. but we're here to declare your cozy little empire over." Each accusation hung in the air like thunderclaps, bringing our camaraderie back into focus. The rejuvenation of those whose lives he'd mangled with a smile and a slick presentation. My mind raced, empowered by the realization that, against all odds, we weren't just victims anymore. We were an army mobilized for retribution. Inspired, I summoned the energy of the women and men flanking me, each with their horror stories tucked within their hearts, ready to rise despite the tremors of upheaval. Picture this, Vincent. A world where families aren't prey to birds of your predatory ilk. A place where the veneer of low rates isn't slick enough to mask the devastation you leave behind. I looked at Nina, whose eyes shone with fiery resolve reflected back in mine. There was magic in this shared indignation, actual raw energy coalescing into a dragon's breath of defiance that would scorch every lie prancing in his bullshit. This isn't just about us, but about everyone you've ensnared. How many more families are out there suffering because of your charming smile and roguish patter? We can be the voices that echo through the halls of justice. Caught in our tempest of rage and unity, Vincent's composure fully unraveled as panic flickered in his glassy blue depths. Stumbling, he attempted half-hearted laughter to mask the growing dread. But it was a loveless chuckle, bereft of the bravado he'd paraded moments earlier. "Oh, come now, ladies. Surely you don't think this little temper tantrum?" But the interruption came rapid fire as a chorus of voices, those of other homeowners united, joined ours. "It's not a tantrum, Vincent. It's accountability. Your moments of bravado now meet a righteous reckoning." My heart surged, knowing we had turned the tide of power within this game. Were we really about to topple his confidence after every belittling encounter we'd endured? The thrill of possibility thrummed in the air like electricity, the delicious flavor of impending victory mingling with the bitter aftertaste of betrayal. As chaos swirled, marinated in our furious debates and critiques, a low murmur rippled through the crowd. More emerged from the shadows, their zeal for confrontation palpable. It was as if every voice from behind closed doors had found its way into the gathering storm, a swelling tide of anger finally breaking free. With this unexpected reinforcement, I felt emboldened to lead our collective charge. "Vincent, your smirks and quips don't hold dominion over our lives anymore. We are no longer isolated rants in lifeboats adrift. We are a fleet. We're each other's lifelines, and together, we will hold you accountable." A resounding clap of affirmation echoed around. These voices, familiar and foreign alike, sparkling like diamonds in defiance against his misdeeds. With each comment thrown, each story shared, the tension in the atmosphere shifted. It transformed from an air of intimidated silence into gravitational energy, propelling us all toward our collective victory. You will not hide behind your figures, Vincent. You will not disguise your incompetence under the guise of financial opportunities. The outcry of shared disdain reverberated as the room contained the very essence of rebellion, igniting a glorious hope. The balance of power felt palpable, teetering on the brink of collapse for him, as we realized it was no longer a fight about mortgages or interest rates. It was about reclaiming our dignity, rewriting our narratives, and smashing his illusion to pieces. As the realization sunk in, a fierce surge of anticipation flooded through my veins. We were on the cusp of justice, a glorious payoff to the catastrophe he had orchestrated. Would we finally manage to unveil the truth and set free the many victims he had ensnared? Only time would unveil the steeped depths of this volatile brew known as vengeance. The room pulsated with a revolutionary energy, every heartbeat synchronized to the rhythm of justice reverberating through our voices. I could see it flickering in the eyes of my fellow warriors. The disbelief mingled with indignation became a force of its own, escalating with each revelation we delivered. One brave soul stepped out, recounting her tale of near financial ruin, the frenzied tears from finding herself on the brink of foreclosure after signing her life away to the luminous promises of Vincent's misleading spiel. Each story wrapped with threads of pain transfixed on a tapestry of collective grievance. This was no simple gathering. This was the manifestation of all the sleepless nights and harrowing discussions that arose from his callous indifference, woven into a glorious banner of shared determination. They were no longer isolated incidents. They morphed into a cacophony of blaring sirens, announcing the dawn of accountability. Vincent, once poised with an air of condescending bravado, was now bullied by shadows of his own making. The smile that had glistened on his face like a movie star's facade faded into a grimace as we stood unyielding. A chorus of righteousness, in full swing. I leaned into the chorus, my voice punctuating his rehearsed arguments with fervor. Pathetic, right? Watching him fumble like a toddler learning to walk in heels? I mentally scoffed, but it was too delicious to keep to myself. You could practically see his perfectly tailored suit getting eerily tight around his chest. I quipped, sending shockwaves of laughter through my ragtag army of borrowers, each chuckle bursting the bubble of his arrogance. My determination to expose him lit a fire in everyone. I was fanning the flames of this inferno, and I could feel their spirits lifting, as each disclosure weakened Vincent's previously indomitable facade. And the magic didn't stop there. The door swung open once again, like a scene out of a dramatic thriller, and in walked yet another anguished homeowner. There she stood, a woman with steel in her eyes, who introduced herself simply as Melanie. It was like she had come straight out of a fairy tale, bearing the battle scars of an unjust ordeal. Her trembling voice gained steadiness as she recounted being robbed of her dreams because of lurking horrors hidden behind Vincent's calculated smile. "Do you remember me?" she challenged Vincent, each word falling like weights around his neck. "You promised me a future, but all I received was a mortgage nightmare drafted in gold ink." The room erupted again. We were always stronger in numbers, buoyed by her authentic tale, Peggy suing every ounce of insincerity he embodied till it was raw. "Can we just take a moment here to feast on the irony?" I thought, gleefully swirling my thoughts like fine wine. The man, so busy promoting opportunities, sits ensnared by the very web of deceit he spun. I was like a kid in a candy store, relishing every piece of drama unfolding mere feet away from us. Suddenly, armed with the resolve of not just me but an army of desperate homeowners, I could feel the tides shifting so drastically that I almost believed we could overturn this pathetic root of all evil. Each story served like a meal on a silver platter, while Vincent, rendered mute, began to wallow in his apparent demise, his pristine suit metaphorically covered in the mud he had so carelessly tossed onto so many unsuspecting lives. Nina, ever the strategist, had her eyes gleaming as she turned our focus back towards Vincent. "Let's cut through the glittering nonsense, shall we? What's the real story? What's buried underneath that perfectly sculpted persona?" With the potency of her intense gaze, we drew focus once more. Because every lofty interest rate you sold was laced with promises you had no intention of keeping. The anger colored the room, a powerful stroke painting our intentions bright, as I watched Vincent now squirming, his back pressed against the cold, unyielding realities we had presented as evidence. The sigh of disbelief escaping his lips mirrored the sound of each deflated balloon filled with hot air shouted into oblivion. He was a man on the ropes, clinging desperately to the shreds of phony authority, irritating smirk all but obliterated in the face of all the accountability we held against him. With our unity in numbers manifesting palpable energy, we transformed from victims into warriors, and I could almost see the fragility of Vincent's empire, painted so carefully, beginning to crack. Each new face that stepped forth only solidified our resolve, each tale a blow to the underbelly of his fabricated trust. This isn't just a crusade against you, Vincent. This is a parallel reminder that elsewhere, far away from this sterile ivory tower, you've treated so many of us like mere data points on your balance sheet. We are not just statistics, we are lives. We are mothers, fathers, and children, and you don't get to snip away our dreams like you're managing your next quarterly report. Our combined indignation radiated like a supernova, an explosion of raw power and claims and outrage laid bare. The weighty burden of our experiences somehow lifting with each word. As the final words echoed through the room, my challenge punctuated by the thunderous applause of my newfound fans, I felt the culmination of our unyielding veracity refreshing my spirit. The energy was palpable. Could we finally unmask the masquerade of deception that had lured so many innocent souls into this financial purgatory? I caught Vincent's panicked gaze, desperate, floundering, like a swimmer caught in a riptide. The laughter, the cheers, and the reaffirmation were not just for the moment. We were constructing an edifice of hope, brick by brick, belief by belief. Everybody had a piece of the puzzle now, and it felt like we weren't just experiencing victory. We were chasing down justice with gleeful abandon. Were we finally ready to topple this tyrant disguised as a loan officer and claim back our lives from his malicious grasp? The air quivered with excitement and certainty. As the applause finally faded, and I caught my breath amidst a whirlwind of emotion, I realized something important. The tide had officially turned. We emerged from the ashes of our financial incompetence, to rally against the charismatic villain who had thought his silver tongue would secure him a fortress of immunity. Vincent, from the lofty perch of his suit-clad opulence, looked on like a cornered lion, and in that moment, I couldn't help but feel the delicious thrill of sweet poetic justice bubbling in my veins. Each story revealed wasn't merely an anecdote. It was part of an intricate betrayal quilt, stitched together by the threads of our collective anger, and now that quilt was smothering him whole. "Good luck trying to wiggle out of this one, Mr. Crowe," I thought gleefully, brushing off the dust from the sleeves of my professional attire, now imbued with a rogue sense of warrior energy. The room buzzed with renewed determination, every pulse sinking to our shared battle hymn. My mind raced through the events before us. It had been a slow crawl through hell, but today felt radical, electric with purpose. Nina, my financial goddess, was texting away like a woman possessed, gathering every ounce of information we could wield against Vincent's fortress. We need names. We need stories. Need those heartbreaking whispers to ring like thunder. She half hissed, half squealed, her eyes twinkling with the manic urgency of a true activist. Each ping of her phone echoed through my mind, a virtual marching order spurring us into motion. "Bring it, Vincent! We're coming to unfurl your deception like a banner in the air." As we began crowdfunding our narratives, I felt as though we were tapping into a communal conscience long in slumber. In the age of social media, we transformed from faceless victims into champions of truth, our saga disseminating far beyond the confines of that sterile community hall. I penned every stroke of my solidarity's journey with gusto, and one by one, ordinary homeowners resonated with my indignation. Instagram posts became teeming with hashtags like Vincent the Vulture and Lone Nightmare, a growing army of outraged souls riding the digital wave of collective fervor. My screen lit up with notifications, stories pouring in like a torrent of pent-up emotion. It was an explosion of outrage that bubbled forth. "Dare I say, experience is contagious," I cackled, as the poetic absurdity of our movement sparked a new level of irony. Yet beneath the vibrant digital thrumming, whispers arose about Vincent himself, rumblings that made the plot thicker than ever. Apparently, his opulent lifestyle wasn't just cultivated from innocent loaning practices. A horde of unsolved complaints belied his crystal facade. They oozed from the cracks of confidence he paraded for all to see. I relished in the revelation that behind his perfect facade lay a trail of disgruntled souls, waiting for their moment to pounce, much like us. Just imagining him frantically juggling damage control while we uncovered layers upon layers of his stories, I couldn't help but stifle a laugh. Ah, sweet irony. He thought himself a puppet master, but it turns out the strings were tangled around his own ego. My irritation veered into a delightful anticipation. We were plumbing our own homegrown forces, fortifying our narratives with real numbers and hard facts. Utilizing Nina's analytical prowess for the grounded truth, we conjured a favorable storm. Each testament against Vincent grew more potent. We were moments away from breaking the dam of pervasive silence, moments from ushering this charlatan toward an interminable collapse. My fingertips danced over a keyboard, rallying support with all the fervor of a carnival barker. "Join us in this justice crusade. This man thought he could play with lives like they were mere numbers in a ledger. We are more than stats. We are the heartbeat of our communities." Ultimately, it all came to a head at the next community meeting. Armed with our evidence, our resolve, and the absurdity of Vincent's undoing written in glorious pixels in print, we arrived like a swarm of righteous avengers. The energy was magnetic, the palpable anticipation sending electric currents through the crowd. I felt unstoppable, buoyed by the vivacious camaraderie of fellow homeowners who shared my passion. No one was retreating from this sacred fight. It seemed surreal to have gathered so many stories, everyone infused with hope and a sprinkle of rage. I recalled past struggles, the sleepless nights, and now the collective laughter over our shared misery. It was finally time to drive home the point that he, and he alone, had turned our dreams into decrepit nightmares. This was our defining moment, the turning of the tide that had once seemed impossible. The meeting room felt charged, our stories possessing a force of nature that demanded respect and accountability. For the first time, Vincent seemed less like a predator and more like the target, vulnerability lurking beneath his veneer of bravado. "Let's make sure he's got a front row seat to this spectacle of reckoning," I smirked, inwardly gleeful as we prepared to hold his feet to the fire. Who knew outrage could summon such strength? With every word poised to bless him with the calamity he'd wrought upon so many lives, I felt the perfect thrill of poetry in motion. Were we finally on the brink of unseating this self-styled martyr of capitalism? To our collective cheer, the answer was an undeniable yes. The room crackled with energy as we packed ourselves in for what felt like a theatrical showdown, mostly because, darling, it was. Here we were, the unassuming underdogs rising from the ashes, armed with our collective narrative like shields made of pure outrage. A crack team of ordinary folks, they called themselves home buyers, stood shoulder to shoulder with me and Nina at the front. It was the kind of leveling up moment Voldemort would have been jealous of. Our battle was now buoyed, not just by outrage, but also by the legislative stakes attached to Vincent's deception. This man had the audacity to ride the waves of our dreams and turn them into tumultuous whirlpools of despair. And we weren't just fighting for our money. We were defending our dignity against the slimiest of financial golems cloaked in tailored suits. As the room filled, I couldn't shake the premonition of Vincent's discomfort radiating through the air. There was a palpable tension, like watching a suspenseful movie where the villain is about to realize that his days are numbered. I had long since stopped doubting our resolve. However, my heart still raced as I imagined the sweaty beads forming under the Sicilian sun bleached slick of his hair while he sat behind that podium, probably rehearsing nonsensical justifications in his mind. Maybe if I smile wide enough, they won't notice that I trampled their dreams under my impeccable wingtip shoes. I thought in my best condescending Vincent voice, suppressing the urge to snicker. My adrenaline was rocketing to celestial heights, every nerve ending aglow with the delightful anticipation of karmic justice. Wouldn't it be just divine to catch a glimpse of him squirm? With the crowd primed like a tightly coiled spring, Nina and I took center stage. As she amplified our alliance with a war cry loud enough to rattle the windows, if you've ever felt cheated by a predatory loan officer, this is your moment. You could feel the palpable excitement crackling through the audience, twinkling like a disco ball at a fabulous party. People were nodding along, clutching their own testimonials, raised fists anchored in solidarity. I could practically see the fear creeping into Vincent's eyes as a chorus of voices filled the room, fueled by indignation that had been pent up longer than an old wine cellar. The momentum swelled as we bathed in the collective anger against his predation, and in that moment, it was almost euphoric. It felt like we were conducting a symphony of righteous fury, and the writer in me almost hoped someone had salsa'd out their phone to capture the melodrama. Wouldn't it be peak irony for that oily man to face the music of his own disastrous symphony? Then, the moment arrived, tentative and thrilling, once the mic was finally being shoved into Vincent's overglossed hand. His glance flickered around the room, attempting to summon that devil-may-care charisma. But oh, sweetie, it was failing him faster than his delusions of grandeur. "Well, ladies and gentlemen," he began, trying to ooze charm like a bubbling chocolate fountain with all the appeal of cold congealed grease, "I appreciate your passionate concerns about financing options." I could barely contain the eye roll threatening to escape, while Nina shot me a look that would make the sharpest of knives weep for mercy. So here we were, the great pretender attempting to rescue his ego with disarming rhetoric while we honed in on the truth. He was a financial clown in a game of serious chess. And baby, the pawns were looking fierce. Each outrageously specific horror story, recited by others, was like nails on a chalkboard for Vincent. When I signed that waiver, I didn't know adjustable rates meant living on a financial tightrope. One homeowner howled, thumping the podium like the righteous thunder of Zeus. Each tale revealed additional layers to his wickedness, biting deeply into his glossy veneer of alleged professionalism. Judging by the twitch in Vincent's cheek, our words were hitting home like a gut punch wrapped in barbed wire. The cacophony of angry yet humorously sardonic oohs and ahs morphed into a symphony. I nearly felt sorry for him, a predatory warrior against an army of truth, telling crusaders. "Remember, Vincent," I thought gleefully, "you may have manipulated financing, but we're financing reform." As the meeting climbed toward its fever pitch, it became increasingly clear that Vincent was losing his grip. The rambling defenses about unforeseen market conditions or unfortunate lapses in judgment fizzled like expired soda cans, full of fizz but absolutely devoid of substance. My heart raced with jubilant indignation as I sensed the shifting tides. People were far less bemused by his sardonic wit and charm now. Speeches turned into demands, and the once tangled web of confusion he spun seemed to unravel faster than my toddler's art supplies after a chaotic craft session. I seized the moment, ready to pounce like a lioness who had finally cornered her prey. "You're a master of deceit, Vincent," I declared, my voice booming through the congregation. But your days of basking in the glow of manipulated lives are numbered. The time for justice is upon us. And just like that, under the glaring fluorescence and the tempest of accusations, solidarity engulfed us all. Cheers collided with indignation. The crowd's collective voice swelled like a tidal wave, an avalanche of defiance against his cultural reign of terror. The negotiations began to feel like a pure electric workout, a cathartic purge of all the built-up frustration that had weighed us down. Vincent was flailing now, flustered and frantically shifting color, redder than a ripe tomato in summer. It was vintage karma, a delicious slice of revenge served on a platter, and we were the chefs of this meal. Did someone order a side of poetic justice? I crooned in my mind as Nina beamed proudly beside me, each glorious moment lighting us up from within. There was no question left. This was our battle, our time to shine, and the stench of his entitlement had never been sweeter. As late afternoon sunbeams broke through the locked doors, illuminating the hard-won truths, we emerged into the world as champions, voices echoing in the quiet dusk. We knew we had just begun to forge a new narrative, one that could reach beyond this stale room and cast shadows on predatory practices as a whole. Striding out of that hall, our heads held high, exhausted yet exhilarated, I turned to Nina and with a bright smile whispered, "Did we just overthrow a financial tyrant?" The delicious thrill of victory, laced with snark, wrapped around us like a fragrant balm to soothe the wounds of the past. Yes, justice had indeed been served, and honey, we were just getting started.